All right, ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs, this is Boyce Brown and Mark French with yet another stirring edition of Ahead of the Curve. How you doing, Mr. French?
I would say good like normal, but somber times, right? It's,
Somber.
feels heavy and thick. There's a lot going on right now. A lot of death of innocent people, and that's never fun, and it should be taken seriously.
Somber indeed, and take it serious we will. But we will expand our analysis of the events in Palestine, and Gaza, and West Asia to look more broadly at other events that have happened in the last few months that show that this is part of the final battle, a definitive battle between the West and the rest. So we could start off with a more gentle version of the war porn, the violence porn,
Yeah,
by looking at this guy. Instead of dead babies, we can look at two stuffed animals, which can seem saccharine, but it also is a surrogate for the love a father has for his family.
hmm
This is a tone poem to open. Here's another slide. Netanyahu sucked the life of me, said his psychiatrist in a suicide note before dying.
yeah.
Maybe you could turn down your output. That might help the echo a touch. He committed suicide after suffering trauma from Israel PM's satanic lies. I can't imagine being this guy's head shrinker.
Yeah, seriously.
Final piece of the tone poem before we get into the meat of the issue. All forms of resistance against a military occupation are legal under international law. UN General Assembly Resolution 45/130, 1990. That's as real as it gets.
Yeah.
So let's place this in a broader historical continuum to start out with. 2023 is the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a beautiful document. If you can touch your output a little lower on the echo help front, perhaps. And in addition,
It's almost all the way down. I can barely hear you.
Oh, that sucks. We'll keep sashaying forward. So, three things have their 75th anniversary. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations, the Nakba, the 1948 expulsion of Palestinians from almost all of Palestine, and apartheid in South Africa. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a beautiful document, and apartheid is a grueling legalistic regime. We could call those the two quivering valences of the dialectic of the Enlightenment. One is among the Enlightenment's greatest achievements, and the other has an unapologetic sadism at its core. Can you hear me, Mr. French?
I can. Can you hear me still or no?
It's great. I can hear you, and there's no echo. Perfect solution.
Okay, great. Good.
Yeah. Okay, so if we take as two ends of the spectrum the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and apartheid, we have one document, magnificent, ethereal, unrealized, aspirational. The other, appalling, concrete, being realized before our very eyes in unspeakable violence. But contextualizing it further, let's look at how most colonialism was focused on the exploitation of resources for the metropole country.
Yeah.
And with a few rare exceptions like Afrikaners in South Africa or the Pied Noir in Algeria, which were settler colonialists, it was more focused on this resource extraction and trade, except for the Anglo-American settler colonial countries, America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the Mittel Europa countries, Israel. All of their prime ministers have all been Ashkenazi.
That's right.
European Jews. And they look askance at the Sephardim, the Mizrah, the North African Jews, and the Ethiopian Jews. But the United States has in Israel what they consider an unsinkable aircraft carrier in West Asia.
Yeah.
And we'll get a little deeper into how they feel about it. But let's look first at the tide of public opinion, which is in favor of a ceasefire. 66% of all likely voters favor a ceasefire and a de-escalation of the violence in Gaza. And yet only 3% of Congress does.
Yeah.
And we'll get into this further as well, but I think part of what we're seeing here is a definitive crisis of democracy in the so-called West, because they're clearly being completely unresponsive to their electorate. So we have oligarchic transnational corporate kleptocracies masquerading as democracies. And they are only able to continue passing off as good coin the concept of democracy because we have elections, basically. We're down to these pageants. It's about the markability of the concept of democracy, not actual democracy.
That's right.
So if we look at it from Tunisian sociologist's perspective, Albert Mimi, who wrote a classic of decolonization called The Colonizer and Colonized, I see myself and you and a wide array of the electorate in these democracies as the colonizer who refuses. We may be born into these countries, but we don't accept the viciousness and the brutality that's being done in our name.
That's right.
So the broader context that I want us to consider as we consider Gaza is that this tale of Palestine is a tale of the eclipse of the West, which we can categorize as the G7, the EU, NATO, the Five Eyes signal.
Five Eyes.
Right, which is all the Anglo-American colonial settler countries, England, Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand. We could also throw in the garrison states like South Korea and Japan, but Japan is already in G7. So conceptually, even parts of Asia are parts of the West.
Yeah.
And they are on their way out. And they're making ever more rash, destructive decisions without strategic forethought. But before we get into that, let's look into Israel's strategic objectives.
Yeah.
Well, for starters, the World Zionist Organization a century ago had a plan for the borders of Israel. It included historic Palestine, South Lebanon up to the Sidon and the Litani River, which is precisely about 40 kilometers into South Lebanon that they're striking now. Syria's Golan Heights, which they have held since the 6 Days War in 1967.
That's right.
Further parts of Syria, like the Haran Plain and Deraa. Control of the Hijaz Railway from Deraa to Amman in Jordan. They don't hold that. Gulf of Aqaba. They do hold that. And we'll get to a potential canal very shortly. So let us feast our eyes upon the iconic map of the disappearing Palestine. Look at it go away.
Yeah.
Before the founding of Israel, all that green was Palestine. At the recognition of Israel, the white was Israel, the green was Palestine. The third piece is the 67 map, the much talked about but completely impossible two-state solution. And the fourth piece of disappearing Palestine is it ends in 2012. But look at it, what it is already by then, 11 years ago. It's a disintegrated honeycomb of Bantustans, rendering the just reflexive recourse to a two-state solution as completely impossible.
Yeah.
And that's 11 years ago.
Right.
Let's look at a honcho, a Jewish honcho, who was not down with the terroristic foundations of Israel. He says about the Jewish terrorists like Irgun and the Stern Gang and Haganah, and many of whom's leaders all became prime ministers and people at the highest ranks of Israeli government.
Yeah.
Albert Einstein said, I am not willing to see anybody associated with these misled and criminal people. So one of the biggest brains of the 20th century was not down with it, Mark.
Yeah.
Back to another map. Let's hide the banner so we can look at the map a little more closely. This is a small map, and if you go to stonefruit.substack.com, you can see it more closely. But how did they acquire the land in the UN recognized in 1948 borders?
Yeah.
By an awful lot of massacres.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get down and you can't really read it on the podcast, but let's read it because their names are sacred and need to be heard.
Yeah.
530 villages in Palestine were destroyed by Israel to create the present state borders for even the fake impossible two-state solution. Baldat al-Sheikh. I'll read it like we're reading dead people at the Vietnam War Memorial.
Well, that's what it is.
Zionist military forces committing dozens of massacres, including multiple villages. Baldat Al-Sheikh, December 31, 1947. Al-Abbasiyya, May 4th, 1948. Lida, July 9 to 18th, 1948. Abu Shusha, May 9 to 12, 1948. Al-Qisas, December 18, 1947. Sasa, February 14th, 1948. Nasir al-Din, April 12, 1948. Deir Yassin, April 9, 1948. Around 15,000 were killed and more than 750,000 were forcefully displaced.
Yeah.
On May 14th, 1948, the day the British mandate expired, Zionists declared the state of Israel to be born. So for so many, particularly in the West, that are not that well educated, they think that history began on October 7th.
Right.
And they say that Hamas attacked civilians.
Well, I mean, the other thing that you just said that puts things in proper context, how many American cities that have been shrinking from being deindustrialized have around 750,000 people now? I mean, you're talking about probably definitely all of Detroit proper, maybe Pittsburgh, Fort Worth, Texas. I mean, there's, name a city, and it's probably that isn't New York or San Francisco or Seattle or whatever. But in Sacramento or anywhere else, USA, you're talking about displacing an entire city. So, I mean, would Americans be shocked or tolerate an occupying force from a foreign country showing up and displacing all of Detroit or Pittsburgh or Sacramento? I mean, they would probably be willing to go to war the next day.
Yeah, go away, Detroit. Leave.
Right. Yeah, die, disappear. Yeah, beat it. We don't need you, we don't want you.
You have three choices.
Yeah.
Die, leave, or submit like a bitch.
Yeah, or shut up. Yeah.
Those are your three choices.
It ain't going down like that.
It ain't going down like that. But this is 1948.
Right, which makes it worse. That's a very good point. It might as well be 4 times that amount of population.
This is how they got the borders of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to another slide. So where did they go?
Right.
They went elsewhere.
Yeah.
Now again, we can read the holy names because their suffering demands at least their iteration.
Yeah.
6 million people were displaced by that Nakba of 700,000.
Wow.
750,000.
Right.
Where did they go? They went to refugee camps in nearby countries.
Mm-hmm.
Ain el Hilwa, Lebanon, established 1948.
Yeah.
Yarmouk in Syria, 1957. Jenin, who they can't stop fucking with in the West Bank, 1953. Yeah. Bekaa, Jordan, 1968. And Jabalia in Gaza, established 1948, that just received 2 2,000-pound JDAMs supplied from the United States, killing hundreds of people because they thought one of the leaders of Hamas was there.
I mean, everybody with a brain knows they didn't think that. That's just what they say to get away with it.
Yes. And we're going to have a little section on how they just violate international humanitarian law left and right. And there's one law called proportionality and distinction. And does the military value match the amount of civilians killed? 400 dead to get one alleged leader? Does not. But we'll dip into their humanitarian law violations in greater depth shortly.
Of course.
So what has been the response of Israel to even the 1967 borders? To continue being like little termites, establishing settlements left and right. Let's make this a little bigger so that our 5 listeners can see. This is the West Bank. And there is a map or a graph showing how the settlements have grown over the years. From 1972 to 2018. And we can see that the West Bank had, by 2018, 463,000 settlers. Let's call them colonists. Let's use language in the proper way.
Yeah.
East Jerusalem had seen 220,000 new colonists. This was intentional.
Absolutely.
They were creating what they called facts on the ground. How far back does it go? The 1994 Oslo Accord established this concept of the two-state solution, which is now impossible by these facts on the ground. But how far?
And look how fast they attacked it. So you're talking about 94. Who is in their first term 2 years later in 96? Bibi Netanyahu.
Bibi.
Who writes the mandate for him to go by? Wolfowitz and Richard Pearl. In their creation of the clean break strategy.
Right.
So, yeah, so I'll pause and let you continue. But the timing is uncanny.
Yeah, clean break is part of it. So let's go step by step with all the documents that made a two-state solution impossible way before 1994 when it became a political aspiration.
That's right.
Okay. 1974, 1967, the Elan Plan, after the Six-Day War, the 1967 war. It said, let's create facts on the ground so that we don't ever have to deal with a two-state solution. 1977, the founding platform of the Likud party, of which Netanyahu is a prominent member. This one bears reading because it's so explicit.
Yeah.
Likud platform. The right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is eternal and indisputable, and it's linked with the right to security and peace. Therefore, Judea and Samaria, which is roughly the West Bank, will not be handed to any foreign administration. Between the sea and the Jordan, there will be only Israeli sovereignty.
Yeah.
A plan which relinquishes part of Western Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, undermines our right to the country, unavoidably leads to the establishment of a Palestinian state. See, they don't want it, even in their founding party documents.
That's right.
jeopardizes the security of the Jewish population, endangers the existence of the state of Israel, and frustrates any prospect of peace.
Yeah.
So 67, Alon Plan, 1977, founding platform of Likud, 1994, Oslo Accords. So this is also still from the Likud platform of 1977.
Mm-hmm.
The Jewish people have an exclusive and unalienable right to all parts of the land of Israel.
Yeah.
Government will promote and develop settlement in all parts of the land of Israel, in the Galilee, which is roughly South Lebanon,
Mm-hmm.
the Golan Heights, which they still hold, in South Syria, and Judea and Samaria, which are roughly the West Bank. Let's take it back a little step further back, way back, when Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, was first conceived in the mind of Theodore Herzl, the founding father of Zionism.
Yeah.
When he said the real Greater Israel is from, quote, the brook of Egypt to the Euphrates. So I'm not sure what those two blue lines on the Israel flag mean. Is it from the Jordan River to the sea, or is it
River
from
to the sea.
Nile to Euphrates?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Well, okay, we're going to still keep going on with these foundational documents.
Mm-hmm.
1982, the Yinon Plan, a strategy for Israel in the 1980s. It was written by Oded Yinon, reputedly a former advisor to Sharon,
Mm-hmm.
a senior official with the Foreign Ministry, and a journalist at Jerusalem Post. He said that it needed to go from the sphere of influence needed to go from the Nile to the Euphrates to exacerbate sectarian and ethnic tensions in the states surrounding what they saw greater influence, now more conceived as a sphere of influence than an actual state, but to exacerbate these divisions and to create statelets in the way that NATO pulverized Yugoslavia.
Well, this would echo the Brzezinski model, who was still at the forefront of lending policy in that regard.
Yeah. And I hate to give war criminals their due, Mark, but Brzezinski and Kissinger at least could think several chess moves ahead.
Sure.
And thought of the consequences of their actions. Unindicted war criminals both. But now the foreign security establishment in the United States cannot think even one chess move ahead. But look at this slide of Greater Israel according to the Yinon Plan.
Right.
It goes to the Euphrates. It goes from the Nile to the Euphrates. The northern third of Saudi Arabia, all of Jordan, much of Iraq, much of Syria, all of Lebanon, even a bit of Turkey.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, even though that plan was years and years ago in 1982, what kind of map does A1 Bibi Netanyahu hold up?
Mm-hmm.
Look at him right there in the UN, in front of the General Assembly, holding up
Sure.
a map and a Sharpie of the new Middle East. Look at that little blue dot, Israel. There's no West Bank. There's no Gaza Strip.
Yeah. Well, and then you bringing that up, it also puts in a different light the British attack on the Suez Canal during 67-ish that puts that in a much different light. Why they are absolutely so beholden to Israel being their aircraft carrier in that region, if you will. This has clearly had other iterations for decades.
Yeah, the provisional title of this piece is The Suez Canal Crisis Moment for Multipolarity
That's right.
or World War III.
Yeah.
So the Suez Canal Crisis was a joint effort by England and France and the new Israeli government to reestablish control over the Egyptian Suez Canal, I think in 1952,
Mm-hmm.
and they failed. And it was the definitive passing of the torch of the British Empire to the new American Empire. And I think the question is, will this war in West Asia be that kind of moment? I think not. I think we'll wait. They'll leave it in an uneasy peace and move on to and leave a destroyed playground to go fuck up East Asia and
Mm-hmm.
fail definitively against China. But that is the historical context that we absolutely need to bring into it. So contain, destabilize, roll back all of these states in Greater Israel. Roll them all back. Make them weak. We have Lebanon bankrupt, the tremendous explosion in their port, a government that can't form and stay stable, Syria in tatters by the dirty war of the West against it for a decade, Iraq, the cradle of civilization, 1 million dead, 500,000 children that Albright said was fine with her,
Mm-hmm.
5 million displaced. Now Iraq is a Shia partner to Iran.
Yeah.
They have destroyed, they have contained, destabilized, and rolled back so many of these countries. And the clean break was 1996 with Pearl
That's right.
doing most of the writing. So that shows all of the many historical precursors to Israel's regional strategic aspirations. But, you know, you and I have talked about the clip from General Wesley Clark
Yeah, Clark. Yep.
with some frequency.
Who clearly saw this document and was told about it with his own two eyes.
Yeah, you want to regale our 5 listeners with the story after 9/11 when he was called in?
Well, he didn't tell it until after 9/11. So the first time I heard him give the account of it was after 9/11, and someone said, "Hey, you know, we're going to pin this on Iraq." And he was like, "Why? Like, they have nothing to do with that." And so he comes across the document and he's told Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, we're going to get this all cleaned up. So he was told about PNAC and Clean Break and is flabbergasted that they would use it for that. He's one of those military men that takes his oath quite seriously and operated at a very high level when he thought he was actually doing something the right way that was actually protecting the country and the Western Hemisphere. So someone at the end of his career that was so shocked at what was happening, left unceremoniously and couldn't stomach it anymore. And, sometimes tells the truth in front of a camera and a microphone. Thank God.
Yes. And he was also a military man through and through, which means fulfilled mission. And the mission
Mm-hmm.
for him as supreme commander of the NATO forces pulverizing Yugoslavia was to finish pulverizing Yugoslavia.
That's right.
And there is a quote from him: "I need maximum violence out of this campaign now." So he ran for president. He saw the folly in trying to go to war against 7 countries in West Asia. But he also has blood on his hands. But
Mm-hmm.
we can, to some degree, forgive him for at least bringing to the American and world public that the policymakers in the Bush administration, just weeks after 9/11, already had their target list, and it was in no way associated with the actual perpetrators of 9/11 because it was an inside job.
Yeah.
But there is also a eschatological religious dimension to all of this. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just colonization. And
That's
we
right.
can touch upon the exact number 7 of 7 countries that Clark regaled the public with.
Mm-hmm.
Deuteronomy 7, 1 to 2 to 24. Yahweh told Israel that he has identified, quote, scripture, 7 nations greater and stronger than yourself that you must put under curse of destruction and not show them any pity. As for their kings, you will blot their names out under heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So, Netanyahu's cabinet is really full of these far-right religious yahoos. And they want to establish control over Al-Aqsa Mosque, which
Yeah.
is the most holy site in Islam.
Yeah,
And
for more than 1 billion people. That's right. Talking about a bunch of Indonesia. I mean, all over the world.
Indonesia is the largest Muslim state
Yeah.
by population. I think Hamas's objectives, if you could boil them down to just their most minimal, don't mess with Al-Aqsa Mosque, Palestinian state, return all of our prisoners.
Yeah.
That might be their baseline. But preserve Al-Aqsa Mosque is of vital importance. So this
Mm-hmm.
takes it out of geopolitics and puts it into eschatological religion. And Netanyahu's cabinet is just rife with all of these hardcore millennial Zionists, and they want to have more Israelis on Temple Mount.
Yeah.
They periodically brutalize worshipers in Al-Aqsa mosques. I mean, there's YouTube of it. They just go in and start swinging their batons at people at prayer.
Well, I mean, you can see a lot of them spitting on American evangelicals that are there to visit the Holy Land and tour, and they're literally, these Southerners from the United States that are Christians are getting spit on by Israelis.
It's quite a relationship between Israelis and the American Christian evangelicals.
It's one of the most unique, unusual things I've ever seen in my life.
Because the Christian evangelicals give Israel tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
Well, and I mean, more importantly, their political capital by allowing stuff like this to happen. Like they're completely infatuated with this extremely weird death cult of the rapture, and they're completely willing to let it happen. So they're very strange support for Israel, a people and a culture that don't care about them at all and probably laugh at all of their money and support, but they'll happily take it. I mean, they're the ones providing the energy for a lot of this.
Yeah, they provide all the money, and because they're such an important voting bloc in the Republican Party in particular.
That's right.
And they provide all the money. But in the back of the American evangelicals' minds, this is all to help precipitate the second coming of Jesus. And when he does, every Jew that doesn't convert to Christianity will be killed. So they give all this money and support to Israel, but their bottom line is that they're all going to die if they don't convert. Your camera froze there, Mark. I'm going to keep going and hope that it works. You can refresh it, perhaps. And the Netanyahu government, his ministers, they are even holding meetings in the tunnels beneath the Temple Mount. And this is really aggravating the Palestinians because they fear that in these tunnels, they could just blow up the Al-Aqsa Mosque from below.
Absolutely. Yep.
And Armageddon comes from the name of a plane in Israel called Ham Megiddo. And it is an actual plane. And if the hardcore Zionist militants destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque, all bets are off.
Mm-hmm.
But let's look at now the resistance to Israel from Palestine in the context of the broader Arab pan-nationalism. Because Israel's brutality has succeeded in uniting the Sunni and Shia factions of Islam, so that this resembles more the 1916 Arab revolt that overthrew the Ottoman Empire. So as the Israeli mood is turning eschatological, so too is the Muslim mood.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going completely ape shit in West Bank. A couple weeks ago, the last figure was they killed 200 people in the West Bank, settlers. And the the internal security minister of Netanyahu government is passing out assault rifles to colonists in West Bank. And, when there's a fracas and the Israeli military comes, a colonist shoots a Palestinian in the West Bank, impunity.
Yeah.
No consequence.
Yeah, I just saw two little Palestinian boys riding their scooter in an alley, and they just get taken down. Total residential neighborhood. Obviously, two little kids wouldn't be riding around a scooter in an alley unless they thought it was just a normal day. So yeah, there's a lot of guns going on, and a lot of people making target practice of children riding a scooter in an alley.
Children riding scooters in alleys. People harvesting their olives and their crops.
Yeah.
They're shot while harvesting. The colonists are stealing the crops as they are ready to harvest. They are shooting Palestinians in the West Bank without any consequence. They are taking their homes. They are taking their lands. They are filling their springs and wells with concrete. And yet, in the American media, history began on October 7th.
Yeah.
So let's look at some more maps again, because the last one ended in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at one today. West Bank settlements forcibly transferred to Israeli control. Transferred after October 7th, partially transferred after October 7th, transferred before October 7th.
Mm-hmm.
The Bantustans that we saw in earlier maps ending in 2018 are even worse.
Yeah.
They're killing Palestinians in West Bank, not just Gaza,
Yeah.
without any consequence whatsoever. And the two-state solution that even their allies like China and Russia still speak of, because those are the laws that Israel is obviously breaking,
Mm-hmm.
are nonetheless totally impossible. And it bears mentioning that the Speaker of the House is a creationist.
Wow. Yeah.
He's a lawyer for creationist theme parks in Tennessee and Kentucky.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Jones from Louisiana.
Oh my God. He is read in to the evangelical nonsense that is causing so much turmoil and so much American support, especially in the political class, even though 66% of the American people want a ceasefire. But let's dip into where it fucking always is, Mark. Resources and money.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's talk about the oil in the nearby Mediterranean waters.
Mm-hmm.
Here you can see a slide of the Levant Basin and significant oil and gas fields that have been found therein.
That's right.
Well, how about another close-up? Oh, look at this one.
Mm-hmm.
Marine 1 and Marine 2. Right off of Gaza.
Yeah.
Now, if you look up above Marine 1 and 2, Tamar or Tamir, that provides Israel with a lot of their energy.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps target if this ever turns into a regional war, I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, and I mean, they're also getting around 35% of their water from the stolen Golan Heights.
Well, Golan Heights is an extreme. Golan Heights is rich farmland and aquifers, but the West Bank is an enormous aquifer. And they're getting a huge amount of Israel's water from the occupied West Bank. So it's not just land, it's water.
Yeah.
But in such an arid region, water is as important as land.
Yeah, and oil and gas.
But oil and gas trumps everything.
Sure. Then you can buy water from elsewhere.
You know, I used to be one of these people that was thinking that Netanyahu was just caught unawares by the October 7th attacks. But when I realized Marine 1 and Marine 2 might have hundreds of billions of dollars worth of oil and gas, I'm less inclined towards that perspective.
Right.
I haven't given it up, but that's a lot of money. And are they ruthless enough to do so to gain it? Yes, they are.
Well, I mean, the other relevant thing about you bringing that up, right, is how long have the British and Americans been there? You know, people don't understand. Americans act like every country on the planet Earth is about the same size as the United States. Like, Cyprus and Greece are what, a 45-minute flight, maybe, from Israel? Like, they don't. So the British and Americans have been causing problems in that region so long just to control that oil market. Like, why do people think Boris Johnson went and talked Zelensky into having 500,000 of his own population murdered at the behest of what? a British and German and EU pipeline, maybe. They wanted to steal all that farmland and gas for themselves. Britain's a tiny little island. Like, why do people think Lawrence Arabia was in that region in the first place? They make it this silly, romanticized, goofy story. Mission.
Yeah.
No, he was there to steal their stuff and figure out where the vulnerabilities of that population were. Britain's a tiny little island that has nothing but what? Some iron ore and sheep? I mean, the only way they can continue to do what they've been doing for hundreds of years is to keep causing problems like this and stealing people's stuff. So the United States just destroyed Iraq. No one in the United States talks about that anymore. Like, what do they think they were doing there? We're already illegally occupying Syria. That's been going on for 12 years, 11 years. I mean, you know, Americans hear on the news, oh, soldiers are getting attacked in Syria. Okay, well, Syria's not Israel or Palestine, you idiots. What are we doing in Syria? Why are American soldiers getting attacked in Syria? Trump said it out loud. We're there to take the oil. We're just there. We're stealing the oil. We're holding their wheat. We might let them starve. We might not. But I mean, this is getting old. Like, this situation now makes me curious of the royal families in that region, of why they've been tolerating this model for so long. I think that's a real question that has to be asked now. Like whoever is, you know, someone should be asking Mohammed bin Salman how he feels about Greater Israel. Someone should be asking Jordan how they feel about Greater Israel. I'm sure there's a bunch of Iraqis that want to make it blatantly clear how they feel about Americans and Greater Israel. And Erdogan, as usual, is playing both sides and saying, don't do this, while no one is interested in Turkey and Erdogan having a rebirth and some kind of majority control. So it's messy there, but I think people should be paying attention to the money and the resources and the banking and the sanctions. To romanticize this as just some kind of play of good and evil is really childish and juvenile, because the story's been way more complex than that since at least the middle 1800s, and for different reasons before that, like before oil and gas even came into play. What you were just alluding to, the Silk Road routes, the access to the Mediterranean Sea, the ports. I mean, you're talking about major money changing and trading centers for all of human history.
It goes back a minute. And so does Anglo-American influence.
Well, I mean, that's our modern iteration, right?
Yeah, that's where the West came into play.
Mm-hmm.
By backing the right horse, Anglo-American interests created the House of al-Saud in Saudi Arabia,
Mm-hmm.
and created Aramco, which has been a partner in exploiting Saudi Arabia's mineral wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And overthrowing Mossadegh in 1953 in Iran, because he had the gall to want to nationalize Iranian oil for the Iranian people.
Sure.
Even though he was far from a fire-breathing socialist.
Mm-hmm.
So the American and British interests in extracting the oil from that region go way back. And now they are allowing Israel, as a proxy of their colonial interests, to do the same
Yeah.
in newly discovered offshore oil and gas deposits in the Eastern Mediterranean. And we're
Well,
talking
the other great thing about what you just said, it's more nefarious on the American side, right? Because they have their own gas and oil. So what's the deal for them? It's all the money washing along with Britain and the big banks, and even more importantly, controlling the oil markets. They don't want Russia and the oil producing nations in that part of the world to be dictating oil prices.
OPEC Plus is about 10% of global output.
Yeah.
But that 10% on the 80% of OPEC is really decisive. So
Sure.
in concert, they can have an extremely important role in formulating the global price discovery.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking real money here in the new offshore oil and gas deposits that could help rebuild a shattered Gaza.
Yeah.
122 trillion cubic feet and 1.7 billion barrels of oil
That's right.
in Marine 1 and Marine 2. Let's pull that slide back up so people can see exactly where it is.
Yeah, last conservative number that I read that seemed plausible but a little bit low was like 485 billion.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
The average, I think the family income in Israel is $40,000 a year, USD a year. It's
Yeah.
3,000 in Gaza,
Right.
in large part because they have been under a 16-year blockade.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just keeping out concrete and stuff that helps them build infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's about keeping out crayons, cinnamon,
Yeah.
musical instruments.
Medical supplies.
Oh, that medical supplies and cement is too practical and pragmatic. It's about
Mhm.
stripping any aspect of joy
Yeah, that
from
too.
their
Right.
life,
Sure.
flavor from their cuisine.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, it looks like the Abraham Accord countries, Morocco, but more importantly, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco. I'm missing a fourth, but all of their money is in London and New York City.
Yeah.
So they are not voting with Iranian and Algerian proposals
Sure.
to come down with a harder line against Israel.
Yeah, 20 or 30 years ago, they literally did a study and calculated the amount of calories that it would take to let Gazans eat but not die. And that's what they allowed in for the next few years. Like that was a real thing that happened in the 90s.
And they have jokes.
Yeah.
They call it, we're putting Gaza on a diet.
Yeah.
By having that kind of minute, down to the per capita level summation of the calories that are allowed in through the heinous blockade.
Sure.
So let's go dashing into the fact that, oh, well, okay, oil and gas, big reason why. And oh, look at the part that they've taken and they won't give back, and none of the Abraham Accord nations or Saudi Arabia will raise a fuss about. There will be no oil embargo. There will be no military resistance. Iran, and to a lesser extent Algeria, with stronger positions, are being ignored. What is likely to happen is that North Gaza will remain Israeli, under Israeli control, and now 2.2 million, who Egypt doesn't want to go into the Sinai at all, and that threatens
They can't afford it.
They can't afford it, although America is dangling the carrot of debt forgiveness before their eyes. So it might happen. But they are now probably going to put the 2.2 million people in 2/3 or half of what remains of Gaza. Why are they keeping the North Gaza? Because that's exactly where the oil and gas is right off of. So they have control of that. What is the second region or reason? What I've been heard called the Ben Gurion Canal.
Mm-hmm.
A second canal from Al Aqaba Gulf through to the Mediterranean as an alternative to the Suez Canal, right through northern Gaza. And the larger geopolitical implications of that in India, we'll get into a little later. But now let's go jumping into another hideous aspect. Israel is an apartheid state. And a number of human rights organizations have said as much. And your camera has frozen, Mark. Maybe give it a refresh. There you are back again. Funky fresh and in the flesh. So this began with B'Tselem issuing a report on January 12, 2021. And let's pull up that report. This is apartheid. A regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea.
Mm-hmm.
Let us delve constantly deeper into this phrase from the river to the sea, because Rashida Tlaib and all the squad voted for all this militarism and money and weapons to Israel. Okay, now they're standing up for the Palestinians. Great, but they voted for it.
Kind of day late and dollar short, right? I mean, that seems to be the MO of the,
We're happy they're doing it. She got censured by her colleagues, but here, B'Tselem, Israeli human rights group, they said Israel is apartheid from the river to the sea.
Yeah.
Who else said that? Amnesty International.
Yeah.
February 1, 2022. And all of these big NGOs, Amnesty International, Greenpeace, they got to trim their sails, and they can't get too radical because they get foundation money. They get big grant money. But even they, as compromised as they are by their need to continually fundraise, still say Israel is an apartheid state. Who else said it? Human Rights Watch said it too. How do we know? Is this just idle chitter chatter? Right. No. International human rights experts spent 5 years utilizing decades of research into Israeli policy regarding Palestine, including Al-Haq and B'Tselem, and prevailing statutes that obtain, like the 1973 Convention and Rome Statute, and they developed a 3-part test. That 3-part test asks the questions: does the state, have they established an institutionalized regime of systematic racial oppression and discrimination?
Check.
Is there an intent to maintain the domination of one racial group over another?
Check.
Have there been a series of inhumane acts committed as an integral part of this regime?
Check.
So Israel is definitively an apartheid state. From the river to the sea should mean one person, one vote. which includes the Palestinians and the Jews living there. But 97% of Israeli society now wants Gaza leveled to a parking lot. And to have a non-apartheid state, one person, one vote, and demography and the birth rate and the return of Palestinian refugees to Israel, Palestine, whatever it's called, as a one state, as a single state, would totally obliterate the hyper-violent, hyper-militarized ethno-state of Jerusalem. So they're clearly not ready for it in any way, shape, or form. But the two-state solution is laughable and unrealizable. And the only realizable solution is a one-state solution. But since that's not going to work for the capital in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem now, thank you, Trump.
Yeah, thanks, Don.
Or DC, let us spend our time now looking at the incredibly heinous imperial military buildup in West Asia, Mark.
They have half of their functional capacity on the entire planet Earth in that region.
It's the largest armada of naval vessels since the 1970s.
You know, my own little sister was a nuclear engineer that powered the boat, the Abraham Lincoln, which at the time, when she was in control of that boat, was rated the 8th largest military power on the planet Earth by itself. That's where Bushy Jr. gave his victory speech from.
Where I'll pull it up to a single person on the viewatory screen so that I can do my George Bush and say that, you know, when I landed on the carrier, I was proud to say, Quagmire accomplished.
That's right. Yeah. That's a good one.
But these fuckers, they've got, and of course, there was a NATO drill there from October 23 to November 6.
Sure.
Dynamic Mariner, 73 U.S. and NATO vessels off the course of Italy. And lurking about, this is one of the things we took so long to do this, we're getting scooped. There's an Ohio-class submarine lurking about.
Yeah.
And they have got 152 Tomahawk missiles, which is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah.
So we got the Ford in the Mediterranean, the entire Ford carrier group still there.
Mm-hmm.
Eisenhower has passed to the Red Sea.
Mm-hmm.
The Ohio-class submarine was spotted in the Suez Canal. Hard to say whether it's in West Mediterranean or East Mediterranean or the Red Sea. Or
well,
now,
the other thing that tells you how serious this is getting, insurance rates are getting so high on normal shipping container ships that they're avoiding those ports. They're now taking an extra week or two to avoid them completely and go around. So they're not even willing to go there. Either just as the loss of insurance rates is so high, but even more importantly, they can't guarantee the cargo now or when it's going to actually show up and be delivered. So once it starts hitting normal people's pocketbooks, you know it's about to go down, as the kids say.
Yeah. The entire Eastern Mediterranean, Red Sea, Gulf of Arabia, Strait of Hormuz, it's all in play. And if you were an insurer, you'd be wise to be cautious about insuring that, because this could go regional or even nuclear within 2 to 3 weeks.
Well, I mean, Yemen knows what they're launching is kind of political, and most of it's not going to make it. If Yemen gets serious and starts launching towards Bahrain, which is the normal naval center over there,
Yeah.
then you know it's about to pop off.
Bahrain has a gigantic U.S. Navy fleet there.
Huge.
But they withdrew their ambassador and kicked out the Israeli ambassador. Even though they are a vassal to the United States, they're playing a bit of a hard line.
Well, I mean, how can you not capitulate to your domestic populations, right? Like, you'll get outed. You're not allowed to publicly side with the Israelis and Americans right now,
Yeah.
regardless of how many backroom, underhanded financial ties you have going on. You can't start having terrorist attacks in your own country because you out yourself as being a vassal state of the West. So I am definitely sure that's a thing that's going on there.
Yeah, all the Abraham Accords countries are all monarchs. And
Yeah.
the normalization with Saudi, they're all monarchs. So they don't really have to have that much response to their general public at all.
Sure.
Because they're not a democracy. But Bahrain in particular is. Qatar, even though they sell energy to Israel, Qatar hosts and funds Hamas too. So they're playing both sides off the middle as well. But okay, so let's look at the carrier groups because that's a lot of muscle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Eisenhower's in the Red Sea. And here is a little part of a promotional video of the Ford going through the Straits of Gibraltar in June.
Yeah.
And the Ford remains in the Eastern Mediterranean. And, sometimes it takes a little honey to make the medicine go down.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ford about 3 weeks ago had a steak and lobster dinner,
Mm-hmm.
which might have been an indication that they were about to enter a turbulent period of their deployment.
Yeah, about to get a little bit funky, huh?
So eat some of these sea monsters and
Yeah.
have some surf and turf.
Mm-hmm.
But you're an expert chef, and the photography of your fine delicacies that you create with your own hand and sprinkled with love are amazing. But let's look at how even steak and lobster can be butchered on the USS.
Sure.
Look at that. God damn it, Mark.
Burnt to a crisp.
Those are normally two of my favorite food groups.
Nice and chewy, extra chewy.
Did you see Apocalypse Now, the classic from Coppola?
Oh, of course.
You remember the chef, one of them on the PT boat, taking Martin Sheen's character to fight with Kurtz, Marlon Brando?
I'm almost positive he was from New Orleans. I'm almost positive he was a Louisiana chef.
He was a saucier.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I just wanted to cook, man.
Yeah.
I tell you, the first month I was in service, and they had this prime rib, and I was really excited. And oh man, you should have seen that meat. It was all well marbled. It looked delicious.
Uh-huh.
And my commanding officer, the chef, he just threw it in a pot of boiling water. And I was like, oh my God, how can you desecrate that meat in such a fashion?
Yeah. It's hard to feed that many people fast, man.
Yeah, 5,000 sailors on a carrier, which could get sunk.
Yeah.
With any missile from Iran. They think the United States, I think they're still fighting 1980 Iran.
Yeah.
1990 Iran. They don't know Iran is full of STEM graduates.
Yeah, they have a real Maverick Goose situation going on. It really is like OG Top Gun. Like they don't understand. Like they could have a 1,000
OG Maverick Goose. Iran are
Drones all
all
about it.
Yeah, Iran has a very strong STEM sector. Have been an intellectual and aesthetic country for millennia.
Yeah.
They have the largest, one of the largest collection of missiles and drones on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Extraordinarily sophisticated military, even though America unilaterally assassinated Soleimani. And Israel keeps trying to push America to attack Iran for it. And Iran's not taking the bait.
They're hot for Iran, man.
They are hot for teacher, not for teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so now let's get into the wholesale violation of international humanitarian law. And here's a tweet from your friend and faithful reporter, Stonefruit. On Twitter, my handle is Boyce Brown PhD. Palestinians, they're killing us all. World opinion, it's genocide. Israeli leadership, yeah, we're committing genocide. Western politicians and legacy media. We're on about page 22 here, Mark.
Yeah.
It's complicated. No, it's not. What it's not is complicated.
Right.
So let's look at what the highest level of Israeli politicians are actually saying.
Yeah. Won't see any of that in the United States.
No. Is Iran conducting genocide? Oxford debates. Is that the question? That is the question. I will argue for the motion because a lot of law centers on intent. Does Israel intend to commit a genocide?
Yeah.
Well, here's a meme that says what top officials in Israel are saying now.
Mm-hmm.
Netanyahu, we will turn Gaza into an island of ruins.
Right.
Israeli army spokesman Hagari, we are dropping hundreds of tons of bombs on Gaza. The focus is on destruction, not accuracy. Kaldner, politician in Likud, there is only one goal, Nakba, a Nakba in Gaza that will dwarf the Nakba of 48.
Yeah.
These are people at the highest levels of Israeli society telling us what they will do.
Well, and then the other important thing about your work, because I never thought we would be dealing with this right now, right? But because of what we just recently covered, going over 9/11 again, which is, who knows how old, and then my personal interest and career, I've been tracing back a lot of these lead to the collapse of nation states and city states and societies and banking lines and things of that nature. But I say all that to say, what these people are saying right now, what you've already brought up in your previous work, talking about Haganah and Ergun and things of that nature, even if you go back to Abraham Isaac Kook, the first puppet of Britain, when this project was undertaken, the language is all the same. So what you just went over from 100 years ago, this is really just what Americans could consider the Trump-style America first. This is their version of Israel first. This language has been there for over a century.
Yeah. Let's finish off with a couple more quotes from these evil motherfuckers. And I don't use that term with any glee or lightness or levity.
Yeah, it's not cute, right? I mean, what else can you say right now? Just but to tell the truth.
What we can say is use their own words. These have
Hmm.
all been quotes. And now I will quote Itzhak Herzog,
Yeah.
president of Israel. It is an entire nation who are responsible. They're half children. They weren't even voting in the last election in 2006. Back to the quote. Herzog, president. The rhetoric about civilians supposedly not being involved is absolutely untrue, and we will fight until we break their backs. Defense Minister of Israel. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly.
Hmm.
Oh, it's such a delicate journey into international law to illustrate intent. They're saying it in their own words. It is a catastrophic, egregious, brazen violation of international humanitarian law, up to and including genocide. Even American domestic laws, your camera froze again, maybe give it a refresh, like the Leahy Law, dictate that the United States can't provide aid to regimes violating the rules of war. There are laws on the books preventing the delivery of aid to countries that possess nuclear weapons outside of international arms control frameworks, which everybody knows Israel does.
Yeah.
In fact, there was even a policy brief from the Israeli intelligence ministry that got leaked to an Israeli magazine and website that said that we plan on expelling all of these people from Gaza into the Sinai. And this was even, I read the memo, it's 3 pages, and it's here's what we're going to do. We're going to get them all out. Collective punishment, every obvious law against genocide and international humanitarian law is being violated egregiously. And they said, you know what we can do to solve that? Large advertising agencies. That was bolded. We just need a better messaging campaign.
Yeah.
On top of the dense messaging ecosystem that AIPAC and all of the Israeli lobbies already have.
Well, I mean, and again with the British, you have Tony Blair and David Cameron being dusted off because of this. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah.
We need
So
a better ad campaign for people to swallow genocide. That's nuts. And that's my personal selfish concern in having this conversation with you. I mean, if everyone lets Israel do this, who's next? Like with all of their ad campaigns and stifling free speech, I mean, this is kind of like a new McCarthy Red Scare, but from the Zionists. Like now if you look at the Zionist model as a human being that doesn't want to see innocent people get murdered, what am I never going to be able to get a job again the rest of my life? Are you going to lock me up somewhere? Like, how far is this going to go?
I think the next chapter on the United States-Israeli connection will certainly address that. But we can finish this off about their violation of humanitarian law and
Yeah,
conduct genocide very easily, because
yeah,
it's too obvious and too insipid to spend too much time on.
that's right.
Destroyed the third oldest Christian church in the world, bombing of hospitals, and a lot of these slides, because this took so long to write, some of these things are a couple weeks old. Al Ahia Baptist, Al Quds, Indonesia, Turkish Palestine Friendship, Shifa,
Mhm.
all hospitals that they've been bombing.
Yeah.
Al Shifa, they said, well, there's a Hamas headquarters right beneath it. No, there's not. No, there wasn't. Now they're in there. They're shooting people in the hospital. No, there's nothing beneath it. No. Bombing of Jabalia refugee camp, 2,000-pound bombs, 400 people. Specifically targeting journalists, doctors, and their families.
Yeah.
Knowing where their families live and targeting that building and killing hundreds of people in that building to get to the family of doctors.
Mhm.
Announcing safe corridors and humanitarian spaces, and then bombing those corridors and spaces.
Yeah.
Indiscriminate targeting. Carpet bombing of civilians. You know, when those buildings fall, it's not like a controlled demolition where everybody's out and cleared out
No,
a mile
it's
away.
no.
There's 50,
Splays out
100, hundreds of
everywhere.
families. There's families in
Yeah.
those buildings that are falling.
Well, and then not only that, but with their previous already control over medical supplies, it's clear why they're bombing hospitals. They want as many people to die as possible. Anyone sick, anyone with a mild injury. I mean, this doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out. Most people in war from World War I and before no no serious medical care. Most people died of starving to death or just getting sick. I mean, this isn't complicated. When you have a population that is already on the edge of breathing and living, you take away the only space they have left that's clean with tools, and it's over with. I mean, you're going to start dying of the most simple shrapnel wounds and cuts. And I mean, it doesn't take a lot of trauma to kill a person when they're already barely hanging on if they weren't getting bombed.
Yeah. Collective punishment, withholding of water, food, medicine, fuel, power.
Yeah.
Using banned weapons, white phosphorus, which they used before in Gaza, which they used on the March of the Right of Return, which killed 214 people.
Yeah.
Why can't the Palestinians just be nonviolent like Gandhi? Yeah,
Right.
well, they did. March of Right to Return, 2019. 241 dead, thousands injured, targeting medics, people in wheelchairs. So that's enough about their wholesale violation of international humanitarian law, which is too egregious to merit any further discussion. Now let's take a look at the Israeli-US connection.
Mm-hmm.
Why does America continually support Israel in spite of being mind-bogglingly heinous and immoral? Well, let's take it one by one. The intense power of AIPAC and the Israel lobby in general. The American Zionist Jews, like when we did 9/11, Larry Silverstein and Judge Halberstam, are very important. And NGOs, some of which we used to respect, like Southern Poverty Law Center. They had a moment in the civil rights era. Anti-Defamation League, B'nai B'rith. They're filthy now. Disgusting. And yet have a power with big tech to control the narrative with their dense interwoven messaging systems. The prevalence of Christian Zionism among evangelicals that we spoke of earlier, and the massive voting bloc that they are, especially in the Republicans. A millennial militarism that both countries share. the power of the military-industrial complex in DC, it is not hard to win votes being a national security hawk.
Sure.
The number of Israel-American dual citizens in government at the highest places. And that's supposed to be, oh, that's an anti-Semitic trope. We got the dual nationals. Well, I'm also a sociologist and a historian, and those are facts.
Yeah.
Blackmail, particularly sexual blackmail
Mm-hmm.
politicians by Israeli intelligence.
Which it seems like the Epstein thing is all rolled up in Mossad.
And Jizz Lane Maxwell.
Yeah.
Her dad was Mossad.
That's right.
Her sister is Mossad.
Mm-hmm.
And Lolita Island in the American Virgin Islands had cameras everywhere and caught people. Dershowitz said, I don't like massages, and I kept my box of briefs on.
That's right.
But blackmail, sexual blackmail in particular, sounds sordid, sounds disgusting, sounds impossible to believe. It's a factor. Travel programs for American Jews, like Birthright, free all expenses paid trip to Israel. And then they just shower you with propaganda about the importance of Israel to American Jews. And here's one I want to spend just a second on. America's foundational myth of itself as the new Israel.
Yeah, that's right.
It's really woven in to so much of American ideological hegemony.
Ethos, mythos, yeah, absolutely.
Mythos,
yeah.
All of those types of nouns.
Mm-hmm.
And let us dip back to the foundation of the foundation. John Winthrop, a pilgrim leader on the ship Arabella, carrying all the initial Puritans to Massachusetts from England.
Yeah.
Said of the settlement to come, for we must consider that we shall be as a city upon the hill.
Mm-hmm.
The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword unto the world.
Yeah.
That's like 1620.
Yeah.
It's woven into every aspect of how Americans think of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, if you play that forward, right, you can see why the colonialists, the colonizers, the Zionists act the way that they do. What do you think's going to happen if you tell multiple generations of people you can do whatever the hell you want? Murder people, spit on people, you're the chosen people, steal whatever you want. I mean, you raise generation after generation after generation of innocent little babies like that. What do you think's going to happen when they grow up? They're going to turn out into psychotic piece of shit adult human beings. That can only go on for so long. That's nuts.
Yeah. I think America and Israel are the two most propagandized nations on planet Earth.
On planet Earth. No one else talks like this without some kind of access to the other side or historical context. It's crazy.
We shall be as a city on the hill.
Yeah.
We are the example to the world.
Yeah.
America is self-inventing itself because it is specially beloved of a Judeo-Christian God.
Right.
And in sixth grade civics in America, it's so that the pilgrims could have religious freedom. No, it's so that they could have freedom to impose a theocracy upon the people under their jurisdiction.
Sure.
It wasn't to have a nice utopia where everybody could believe whatever they wanted to believe. It was to create a theocracy in the New World.
Yeah, there were already millions of people that lived here, and a lot of them got murdered.
They were not in the community of saints.
Right, exactly. So burn them.
The community of saints had to expand throughout the continent. And by expanding, kill the indigenous people there.
Yeah.
Who had their own versions of constitutionalism and were very sophisticated politically, while
absolutely
they're starving on the shores of the Atlantic.
Way more sophisticated.
So we can round out Israel-United States connection by saying that, and this is what RFK said in his recent thing, that Israel is America's aircraft carrier in the Middle East. I don't like Middle East. I'm trying to only say West Asia. It's a military surveillance outpost. It helps America facilitate control over the hydrocarbons and the trade routes of West Asia. And it's been a very reliable partner, even though it's, the Pollard, he gave away the family jewels of all the communication codes that were Israel then sold to the Soviet Union. But by and large, America and Israel have had a decent partnership, with Israel doing a lot of covert stuff that America needed to have plausible deniability for.
Sure.
But also, Israel is a laboratory for social control. And what they do to the Palestinians, they will eventually do to the domestic population in the United States.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe not quite as viciously. They're going to try and rely on narrative control and big tech and censorship, industrial complex, until that doesn't work. But then, as Frank Zappa said, once all the high-flown rhetoric of democracy can no longer work, they're just going to pull all the furniture away and lift up the curtain, and you'll see the brick wall at the back of the theater. So now we can start getting into some of the other players in West Asia. Let's talk about China.
Yeah.
Now we're on page 25. Let's look at their forces there. They had the 44th and 45th task forces of the People's Liberation Army. And the 44th was there before the events of October 7. And the 45th was scheduled to relieve them, but they stayed. And here's a slide of various destroyers and frigates and cruisers that they have, and a submarine. But most importantly, they have the YJ-18 ship killer missiles with a 280-mile nautical mile range.
Yeah.
And they did exercises with Oman and now Pakistan. So they're making partnerships in the area. And they've got forces. They don't have an aircraft carrier. Their domestically produced Shandong aircraft carrier is still in South China Sea, as far as I know. But they have a small but noticeable force. They've been wargaming with two regional people, and they have the ship killer missiles. So it ain't nothing. let's say. And their only base is in Djibouti, which, as you can see from this map, is in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, at a very strategic juncture of where the Suez Canal comes out into the Indian Ocean, and very close to the Strait of Hormuz. And Djibouti is kind of interesting. Everybody has a base there.
Yeah.
Here's a slide. I don't think it even has everybody. China has a base, Japan, Italy, France, US, of course, Saudi Arabia. I think there's a couple more countries that have bases there. But Djibouti's, hey, everybody, hey, you're going to give us a few $100 million a year.
Money, food, yeah. Come on.
We're on everybody's side. We don't care.
The capital of Djibouti is Djibouti. It's easy to remember. Come on in.
And if any of our 5 listeners out there are Frank Zappa fans, one of his great albums was Shake Djibouti.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But since we're on China, let's dig their statecraft.
Uh-huh.
Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader, led a delegation of Republicans and Democrats to Shanghai on October 7th, the very date of Hamas's attack and jailbreak. I will now go into a George Galloway Scottish accent. Hamas led a brave and valiant jailbreak out of Gaza into the occupying regime. But in a similar way that Imran Khan was caught in Moscow on February 22nd when the special military operation, moved into Ukraine, so too were Schumer's delegation caught in Shanghai on October 7th. But look at how they were received by the slide before our eyes. They were not.
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah.
Don't give a fuck about their presence.
No.
From the Chinese side.
Right.
She is in, oh my God, Mark. She's in San Francisco.
That's right. Since yesterday.
For the APEC summit. This was supposed to be a reset. And one of the most egregious things that Weekend at Bernie's mannequin, Joe Biden, said several months ago was that she was a dictator.
Yeah.
What did he say at the close of this? Or I don't even know if it's closed. What did he say on the second day of the APEC summit? He said she's a dictator again. Motherfucking shit, for the love of God, Joe Biden.
He's so embarrassing.
I know you're cognitively impaired. I know your handlers run everything, and we'll get to how clueless your handlers are.
Yeah, right.
And there's a thing on Twitter of Blinken. He looks like he's on coke, or he's just, I'm going to explode because I'm working.
Oh, no, that was definitely, Blinken was definitely on cocaine. Like the weird, the breathe, swallow, yeah, like that was definitely just his breathing and swallowing, just the old nasal drip coke swallow. Yeah, that he did a lot of cocaine.
I think he got some of that Colombian shit from Zelensky.
Yeah, Zelensky's
last press meeting, he said, if you can give us money, give us credit. We will pay back the money after the war. When I'm going to be, if I'm not killed and hung from tree by Azov right sector, I will be a glorified mayor of Kiev because Russia takes Eastern Third, Romania, Hungary, Poland, they all take. And we are on the hook for all of this aid already to BlackRock and Wall Street predators. But
Yeah.
give us money. We will give you money after on credit.
No, that's right.
Oh,
It's like, well, I can't give you credit publicly yet, but I can give you some Colombian cocaine.
Oh, you got that uncut shit?
Okay. I'll find somewhere to sell it.
Zelensky, check it out, man. How about I promise you some missiles, you promise me some of that uncut.
Yeah. Yeah, for real.
Yes, Tony, now we are
Yeah.
talking towards it. Yes. I will give you some uncut. My Zelensky is turning into Triumph the comic insult dog.
Oh, yeah. It happens.
Yeah. And he is a funny guy, the insult dog. Why do we create geopolitical turmoil when we could all live in peace? If only a hand puppet dog could say such smart things.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to reality and geopolitical analysis. Let's compare the reception that Schumer and his cohort of senators got with Maduro a couple weeks earlier. Venezuelan President Maduro gets a red carpet.
Yep.
And a full military honor guard.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what they don't say? America lifted the sanctions against Venezuela so that they could take all of that sweet crude off of the market and into West Texas or into Houston area refineries.
Uh-huh.
He's not saying that. She's not saying that. She is playing the long game.
Yeah.
And he's saying that, this is a quote from the Xinhua State News Agency. This is the readout. That he announced the elevation of the country's relations to an all-weather strategic partnership. China will continue to firmly support Venezuela's efforts to safeguard national sovereignty, dignity, and social stability, as well as its just cause against external interference.
Mm-hmm.
He's not saying, oh, America lifted the sanctions, so you're giving all the oil to them. Give us the oil. And I don't know to what extent lifting of the sanctions allows Venezuela to regain control of the $70 billion of gold that London stole from them.
Sure.
I would hope that it is a brief window where they can repatriate their gold.
Yeah.
But China's saying, you do you with U.S. for now, we get it. But for the long term, we have an all-weather strategic partnership, and you get the full honor guard welcome.
Well, I mean, not only that, but just in a realistic, practical, day-to-day scenario, I think it was the third or fourth largest refinery just had a really bad fire.
Did they?
A lot of the big refineries that are used for domestic purposes, the pipeline that goes from Texas and Louisiana over to the East Coast and through Appalachia, I mean, one of those just had a bad fire. Another one got wiped out by a hurricane. One of the biggest refineries, it might be the biggest, around the Long Beach port structure, Emerald Empire or something like that, a really big California refinery that services the West Coast. Something happened there. I mean, the United States has barely of refining to service its own domestic population.
Yeah, and I'm not a petroleum engineer, but I believe Venezuela crude, they have the largest reserves of any country. Proven reserves.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Why Xi Jinping can say, you work with
Take
America
it easy.
now.
Do what you got to do. Yeah.
We understand. But in the future, we're here for you. You're part of the global majority. And that's going to be the primary thesis of this entire podcast and stonefruit.substack.com. New.com article, is that
Yeah.
there's an emerging global majority, and Gaza is just one extraordinarily tragic, horrific facet of it, but
Mhm.
only one facet. And she's thinking the long game. Wang Yi is thinking the long game.
Yeah.
Wang Yi was China's foreign minister. He was elevated to be a member of the Politburo. The foreign minister and the defense minister, and number 2 in China, Li Qiang, I believe. Li Qiang died. The other 2 got sacked.
Yeah.
Seems like a bit of house cleaning on the part of Xi Jinping.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Your foreign minister, your defense minister, and your number 2. Well, let's look at what Wang Yi, who still has the credibility to speak for the Politburo, what did he say recently? In his recent discussion with the Chinese foreign minister, he said, Faisal bin Faram al-Sad, he said, China believes that the historical injustices against Palestine have lasted for more than half a century and cannot go on. He said that all countries that love peace and uphold justice should speak up and clearly call for early implementation of the two-state solution. See, they're still stuck on the two-state solution because that's the laws that are being broken. That's the obvious solution. China stands ready to work with Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries to continue supporting the Palestinians' just cause of restoring their national rights and bring the Palestinian question back to the right track so that the two-state solution can be resolved comprehensively, justly, and permanently. That was on October 15th. What did he say on the same day to the Turkish foreign minister, Hakan Fidan? He said, Wang Yi did, the question of Palestine has always been at the core of the Middle East issue, which is exactly what my new friend and mentor on West Asia, Ibrahim Aude of the University of Hawaii at Manoa, said to me. The question of Palestine has always been at the core of the Middle East issue. Wang Yi, still quoting, if this issue is not resolved fairly and reasonably, it is impossible for the Middle East to achieve lasting peace. Facts once again proved that the only way out is to resolve the Palestinian issue, and that Security Council resolutions are effectively implemented, and the two-state solution really landed. Well, Wang Yi met with this yo-yo in chief,
Yeah.
Blinken, and I'm just going to have a little snippet of what Wang Yi said. China and the United States need to have dialogue. Not only should we resume dialogue, the dialogue should be in-depth and comprehensive and return it to the track of healthy, stable, and sustainable development. Mark, China doesn't want war.
No.
They just want trade and international law.
Yeah.
And they know that they'll do fine with free trade and international law.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they want.
Yep.
And actually, I saw the video, and Wang Yi he's going off for like 2 minutes actually on this theme that I have the slide up about. And after 2 or 3 minutes of Wang Yi freestyling, Blinken goes, "I agree with what the foreign minister said."
That's perfect.
But we also need to look at it's called the Showcase Military Affairs Forum in China.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Xiangshan Forum, October 29th this year. Almost everything we're quoting is in the last month or two, all related to Gaza, tangentially, but we're using the events of the world to show that Gaza is just a portion of the larger move to multipolarity.
Yeah.
And the Russian defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, who Prigozhin found out is not one to be trifled with. "Oh, we are very sorry your plane fell out of sky." Although that could have been French intelligence. Who knows? But Shoigu said that, he was initially listed as a high-level guest speaker at the Beijing Xiangshan Forum, but I think because they couldn't provide an equal to him in Chinese government, that he was quietly sidelined, but sidelined in such a way that the message was still conveyed to the global South and everyone that cared to read between the lines, because Major General Yahya Rahim Safavi, senior military advisor to the Islamic Revolution and the former chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, which Soleimani was assassinated of as the leader, and General Zhang Youxia, vice chairman of China's Central Military Commission. So, okay, we don't have a minister for you, but we're going to speak at the Politburo level with Iran. And they stress the importance of mutual defense ties. And that is Major General Yahya Rahim Safawi. And he said that the Al-Aqsa Storm, that's the Hamas name for their military operation on October 7th, against Israel was a legitimate act of defense against 75 years of occupation. The Zionist regime's war on Gaza is genocide, and we insist on the need for an immediate truce in the war and delivery of humanitarian aid. And China's role is highly important to counter American hegemony and unilateralism in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So China, they didn't have a defense minister, but they sent the honcho from the Politburo.
Yeah.
And they're talking to the highest guy in Iran that they could.
Yeah.
So who did America send? Xanthi Karas, the U.S. Defense Department's principal officer for issues related to China. Does she look like a heavy hitter, Mark?
No.
No. Are they insulting China and Iran by sending someone at such a low level?
I think they're insulting themselves, but that may have been the intention.
She is the China head in the Defense Department. They
She's
couldn't
the
get
Newland. She's the Newland for China.
Well, Newland is number 2. She's acting Deputy Secretary of State.
Mm-hmm.
If at the beginning of the Biden administration, she was Deputy Secretary of State for East Europe, I believe.
Yeah.
But this is even lower.
Yeah.
She's not the Asia director. She's the China director for the Defense Department.
Yeah, that's bad.
It's such a low-level person to send, and it's so insulting.
Mm-hmm.
And how does China respond? Look at this map. They don't need to fire weapons.
Right.
China. They're mapping platforms because they don't allow Google and a lot of the big tech firms of the United States into China because they don't want them to fuck with China.
Right.
So they have their own versions. So they've got Alibaba and Baidu for mapping. Here's one. Look, no Israel. Here's another. Look, no Israel. So a way for China to send a message of diplomatic distaste without firing a shot would be to just take them off of the map.
Yeah.
All right. So now we can get into it. Mark. This is... Now we need to look at how the war in Gaza... Well, war is when two sides are fighting.
Sure.
This is more of a slaughter of women and children.
Yeah.
But the most important thing it relates to is international development of infrastructure. So let's compare China's Belt and Road Initiative to the events of the day. This is the family photo of the 10th anniversary of Belt and Road, which was held just a few weeks ago in Beijing. And I'll take our beautiful faces out of it to show the slide of the family photo in the largest. And who is at the middle? She and Pooty Poot. And here's something to blow your mind, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
John Kerry. This is from a professor in a Chinese university who has been president of Goldman Sachs, who's plugged in, who's briefed in, who's dialed in.
Yeah.
He said that Xi Jinping spitballing about Belt and Road with John Kerry, Secretary of the State at the time. Hey, I'm just spitballing here. We got an idea called Belt and Road. You want to jointly lead it? When it was still a glimmer in the Chinese Politburo's eye.
Sure.
Their first thought was to engage America, create a win-win solution, and offer them to co-lead it.
Yeah. And why wouldn't they think that way? I mean, getting them into the WTO was, lost in its form because of China. Like, why wouldn't China approach us with that?
They just want to trade.
Mm-hmm.
They want win-win solutions. They don't
Yeah.
want the aggravation and expense of war. They have one base in Djibouti because they need the energy. That's it. Kerry called it the single worst missed opportunity of his political life.
Yeah, I bet.
To which I say, no shit, Sherlock.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Jesus Christ. Now it's been perpetually cast as the yellow hordes trying to take over the world when America was invited to be a co-leader with it at the very beginning.
It's pretty embarrassing.
But, okay, we can go back to the family photo. There, because I guess of the Ukraine war, there were a lot less European leaders than before. 2017 BRI Forum, 30 heads of state. 2019, 37 heads of state. This year, only 23. And 2017, 10 leaders from Europe. 2019, 11 leaders from Europe. This year, only 3 from Europe. But 3 important ones that all of us who track the allies of the global south within the EU will immediately recognize. The 3 European leaders at this year's Belt and Road Forum in Beijing included Viktor Orban of Hungary, Serbian President Alexander Vučić, and Putiput.
Yeah.
Previously, Belarus, Czechia, the Czech Republic, Greece, Italy, Switzerland had all been top leaders that had sent people to the 17 and 19 summits, but they all skipped this year. But we had leaders from 23 other countries across Asia, Africa, South America. So now let us start looking at what is this emerging global south?
Mm-hmm.
For example, who went to the 3rd Belt and Road Forum? Look at all the red there. Most of Eurasia. Yeah. The largest Muslim power, Indonesia. Pakistan, always playing both sides off the middle. Important transportation corridor from from Western China to the Indian Ocean. Egypt, Ethiopia, both new BRICS members. Argentina, new BRICS members. They all attended. So what kind of stuff did Xi and Putin talk about? Well, Xi mentioned the China-Europe Railway Express, which I think is their great hope to unite their need of commodities, but more export markets, because Europe doesn't have any commodities.
Yeah.
So it's just really a trade corridor between Beijing and Europe. And also the Trans-Caspian Transport Corridor. But as a transportation corridor from east to west, from Asia to Europe, it really falters in 2 points, both bodies of water, Caspian Sea and then the Black Sea, which it's going to increase the cost of tonnage per mile because they got to get off the train, get onto a boat, get back on the train, get back onto a boat, get back on a train. But for the Trans-Caspian Transport Corridor, if it ends at the Caspian Sea, then that just means China can drain all of the oil and gas from the Caspian Sea to itself.
Yeah.
So I don't think they would like a transportation corridor to export to Europe, but I think more so they would like to have all the energy from that area to go to them.
That's right.
So what did Putin highlight? He mentioned some of their own Eurasian integration strategies, the Eurasian Economic Union works in progress, West Siberian Railway, and he did mention the international north-south transportation corridor through Iran and the northern route in the Arctic. With the global warmings,
yeah,
that's now a transshipment route.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying we're going to create more supplies and fuel that's reliable on that route. All right. 10 years after the establishment of the Belt and Road Initiative, we can finally see the European Union's counter to it. Global Gateway. And here's a illustration on one of the policy briefs of the European Union about Global picture illustrates, Mark?
What?
It's unrelated to anything or any actual transportation nodes.
It's just like some fake satellite communication. Oh man.
Just little dots on the map of Europe heading
Sure.
towards Asia.
Yeah.
10 years after,
Wow.
they finally had a global gateway meeting in October 25, 26 of this year in Brussels. And mind you, Brussels, Belgium, they're saying, because Europe is trying to use they parked all the $300 billion that they stole or that they sanctioned from Russia. They parked
Yeah.
the Euro bonds. They have the interest from the Euro bonds. They want to give the interest to Ukraine. And even Belgium is saying, whoa, whoa, whoa.
It's a slippery slope.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Sanctions are one thing,
Yeah.
but we manage SWIFT for the West.
Uh-huh.
You're fucking with our money now.
Right.
We can sanction them. We'll put their money in bonds. It can get resolved. People are mad, but not too mad. Taking
Sure.
their interest to give it to Ukraine. Whoa, 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 whoa. But so the meeting for Global Gateway was held in Brussels just this October. Guess who was not invited? China. But, and this is the best part. China's already infiltrated every attempt of the West to fuck with BRI. China's already 3 moves ahead and checkmating. They are the largest investor in Energias de Portugal, which is on the advisory board of Global Gateway. They're owned by the State Assets and Supervision Administration Commission of China. China is the largest in this company that's on the advisory board of Global Gateway.
Yeah, they've been doing that a lot.
Yeah. So who is invited to this conference? Well, a kind of a combination of pissant countries and middleweights. Armenia, which is very important because they are in a kind of Russia's NATO, which is Russia, Belarus, Armenia, I believe Kazakhstan, and maybe one other stan in Central Europe. But they were not helped when Azerbaijan, which is very close to Israel and sends a lot of energy to Israel through the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, and they got a lot of weapons, drones, missiles, what have you, to do this absolute blitzkrieg on Nagorno-Karabakh. And Armenia said,
well, Pashinyan kind of gave away Nagorno-Karabakh. You know, that was a bad move.
but he was hit so hard and so fast by Azerbaijan, it was really hard for him to do anything else.
Yeah.
But so now Armenia, even though they're in Russia's NATO, they're saying, well, Russia didn't help. They were busy with Ukraine, but they didn't help. So now there's a corridor that we'll get to a little later, Zanzibar corridor. But so now Armenia is trying to play the West against Russia. Who else was invited to the Global Gateway flagship seminar? Comoros? What's their citizenship by investment threshold? My pocket change? I want to join. Namibia, Mauritania, Senegal, Somalia, Albania, Bangladesh, Egypt, who are both members of the BRICS New Development Bank. Georgia, which is definitely more in the West camp because they're a transshipment place for the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline and the ports they have on the Black Sea. Morocco, an Abraham Accord country, Moldova, Rwanda, and Serbia. I'm surprised that EU is letting Serbia play because Serbia is non-compliant. Serbia doesn't give a fuck about being told what to do. And I say that as a proud foreign student there in the 80s in Belgrade. And when I got out of the railroad station in 2005, and I had not been walking more than 3 minutes before I saw a late model Mercedes sedan run a delivery van off onto the sidewalk, and they both got out and hauled off into fisticuffs. And I said, I'm home. I'm back in Serbia. And you may hear the helicopters of the military industrial state flying above me because I am 10 miles from Pearl Harbor. So, 2 members that were at the conference were members of the BRICS Bank. So they've already gotten in. They've already are majority stakeholders of someone on the advisory board. So EU is, I wouldn't say compromised, but the EU is too dumb to even know that China's already thinking a few steps ahead of them.
Yeah.
Now we can look at America's response to BRI, which was no less stupid. BRI started 12-13. Not until 2019 did US come up with anything.
Yeah.
They called it the Blue Dot Network. Australia, Japan joined. 60 million in funding. But that was a commitment. I don't see any evidence that they did any of it. And the United Kingdom and Spain, United Kingdom joined in April 2023 and Spain joined in May 2023. But did they join the Blue Dot or did they join some of the G7 initiatives that we'll discuss right now?
Mm.
For example, you may recall that Biden initiated the Build Back Better domestic policy in the United States of America. He had a comparable program overseas, Mark. It's called the Build Back Better World. Yeah, B3W. And they made a passing reference to Blue Dot as a source of values. Key values: transparency, because Belt and Road is called debt trap diplomacy.
Yeah.
That phrase came from an Indian think tank. So they're going to elevate transparency and financial, environmental, and social sustainability. Build Back Better World. B3W, and the acronyms are going to start coming fast and furious, Mark. But it was nothing. They were going to look at climate, health, digital technology, gender equity and equality.
Yeah.
China's saying we're going to build harbors,
Yeah.
railroads,
Right.
hospitals, schools. America's vaporware is climate, health, digital tech, gender equality. And this was in bold on the press release here. Collectively catalyzing hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure development for low and middle income countries in the coming years. June 2021. Well, that didn't work, so we need to go on to another thing. During the G7 meeting in Germany in the Alps, June 26 to 28, 2022, they've changed the name. It's no longer Build Back Better World. It's Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. Oh, how about that? Now they've got a specific figure. It'll mobilize $200 billion through grants, federal financing, and leveraging private sector investments. climate crisis, IT, communications, gender equality and equity again, and health systems again. Maybe they need more biolabs like they have in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. More vaporware. So then they moved on to, okay, now we need our vaporware to be some rubber that hits the road. So this September, because we're dealing mostly with stuff that happened in the last few months, September 9 this year, sidebar to the G20 meeting in New Delhi, they announced a landmark India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know what all four of these iterations of America's response to Belt and Road share in common?
What's that?
They're all press releases.
Yeah. Well, and they were all probably destined to end with Netanyahu's red marker at an Israeli port.
Oh my God. So this is really important, and some of our favorite analysts like Pepe Escobar are talking about it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
This is an eastern corridor and then a western corridor. And the western corridor, and it's a 3-page memorandum of agreement between US, India, Saudi Arabia, UAE, France, Germany, Italy, and the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 corridors, the eastern corridor and the western corridor. The western corridor will be a railway that upon completion, this is a quote from the press release, will provide a reliable and cost-effective cross-border ship-to-rail transit network to supplement existing maritime and road transport routes, enabling goods and services to transit from and between India, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, and Europe. Well, that's the Western Corridor.
Mm-hmm.
You know what the Eastern Corridor is?
It's probably just India.
It's the Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
Don't need to build much for that.
Right.
Just send your ships along.
Yeah.
And very closely allied with this is another initiative. And here's my point, is that all these are partnerships. Well, and we'll get more to it when we look at Jake Sullivan's recent article in Foreign Policy. These are just press releases and partnerships and memorandums of understanding and agreement that never amounted to shit.
Yeah. As usual.
They're not doing
Right.
anything.
Yeah, it's just words.
Yeah, but close to this is another one called the I2U2. They love these snappy acronyms.
Yeah.
I2U2 is India, Israel, UAE, USA. All right. Let's see how China, with the capacity to think a few chess moves ahead, has regarded these efforts and will make any American or Western initiative in international infrastructure development already be reliant upon and partnering with pre-existing Chinese partnerships and investment. So here is a map of the India, Middle East, Europe corridor.
Yeah.
And it relies upon Abraham Accords countries like UAE and Israel-Saudi normalization, which is on hold with the slaughter in Gaza. It relies on making Haifa an international port of record. But let's look at all of these links in this corridor. Now, I don't know if it's quite owning or owning the management contract, But who owns Haifa and Piraeus ports in Israel and Greece?
I'm almost positive China owns at least two of those.
China owns or manages Haifa and Piraeus.
Yeah, that's right.
Who developed the ports in the UAE and Saudi Arabia?
China.
Who built the track from the UAE to Saudi Arabia? China.
Yeah.
Who's building the land bridge from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia to Jeddah on the Red Sea?
China.
So China's already beat America at its own game, trying to integrate all of these supplicants to its geopolitical objectives. But since this is a G7 initiative announced during a G20 meeting, who is going to be the president of G20 in 2024? Brazil.
Oh, yeah. Lula. Yeah.
Who doesn't have the widest latitude of action because he knows the neoliberal forces are calling some of his shots. But Brazil is the president of G20 in 2024, and in 2025, the president is South Africa. So we've got 2 years for two of the founding members of BRICS to decide whether they want BRICS to be the dominant multilateral organization representing the global majority that is clearly not emerging, but has emerged.
Yeah.
Or whether they're going to let G20 skate on through. Now we look at Russia. And one of our favorite bad mama jammas, Lavrov. The point I want to make with all of these quotes is that there's a global majority created, in existence now.
Mm-hmm.
September 23, Lavrov says, our future is being shaped by a struggle between the global majority in favor of a fair distribution of global benefits and civilized diversity, and those who want to wield neocolonial subjugation.
That's right.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And what did Putty Poot say at the Valdai conference in October this year? He said, attempts to establish a monopoly were doomed to fail. The world is too complicated and diverse to be subjected to one system, even if it is backed by the enormous power of the West, accumulated over centuries. And he spoke at this conference for nearly 4 hours, Mark.
Yeah, he does that. Yeah.
4 fucking hours. Whereas the video for this slide,
right,
that's Biden with Blinken and Kirby behind him.
Yeah.
On Air Force One coming back from Tel Aviv after his recent visit to Israel. And first of all, there's like these incredibly pregnant 20-second pauses where he finally...
Well, I mean, Blinken and Kirby just looking at each other, they're like, this is horrible, we're fucked. Like,
I got this picture from Pepe Escobar's Telegram.
Oh, it's hilarious.
And he said, this says it all.
Yeah, because, it really does.
This video is on YouTube, and it's at stonefruit.substack.com as a link. But they are constantly trying to get each other's eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, shit, are you as scared as I am? Is he about to say shit we can't walk back?
Uh-huh.
And he's just stumbling for words for 30 minutes and finally just spewing utter nonsense. And he's 80. And Putin's 70, he's not a spring chicken, but he can talk about geopolitics and history and economics for 4 hours. And Biden can barely get through a 3-minute statement in front of the press corps on Air Force One.
Mm-hmm.
But back to Russia. They have put MiGs with Kinzhals on 24/7 alert around the Black Sea. The MiGs have a range of 700 kilometers, and the missiles have a range of 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
All of that military buildup in the Eastern Mediterranean is within their range.
Yeah.
But, you know, having said that, Russia has good relations with Israel. There's 500,000 people in Israel that speak Russian as their first language.
They have their own oblasts.
Yeah. So I think they could be a good partner for peace, an honest broker. But also, Putin's not fucking around. And he called Lavrov, Shoigu, and his entire Security Council to a meeting. And he said, the United States as a global superpower is becoming weaker and losing its position. And everyone sees and understands this, even judging by the trends of the world economy. The American-style world with the hegemony of one country is being destroyed and is receding gradually but inexorably into the past. I think that's where we're at. And to get ourselves moving along to a conclusion of this broadcast, let's look at what Nebenzia, the ambassador to the UN, said, which was horrifying destruction in Gaza. Thousands of children, horrifying suffering. But he said, as an occupying state, they do not have the right to self-defense, which is what we've been hearing in the legacy media in the West forever.
Well, and that's what that's what current international law says.
As an occupying country, they have to protect the occupied people.
That's right.
But this is very high stakes. November 7th, Putin signed into law a few days earlier, but it came into law on November 7th. They withdrew from the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty.
Mm-hmm.
So now the United States and Russia are neither are a party to any of the major nuclear arms agreements.
Yeah.
This is very dangerous.
Well, and then the reason Israel hasn't been and isn't or wasn't is strategic ambiguity. They've said repeatedly since the 80s, we won't introduce them to the region, clearly indicating that they have them. They just didn't want to be subject to international law or treaty.
Mm-hmm. So let's start using the activities of the multilateral organizations to start defining for us who is this emerging global South.
Mm-hmm.
We can look at this vote. This was the Ukraine vote, where Russia should withdraw and peace in Ukraine. The abstentions here are very important.
Yeah.
India was one of them. But looking at this vote, we can see the beginnings of who is the global South. But let's take this because now we're starting to talk about some of the single players in this crisis in West Asia. Let's look at India a little further. They voted to abstain on this one. But they have a lot of things that they like about Israel.
Yeah.
My thinking has changed since you and I have been working together for almost 2 years, Mark.
Yeah.
I used to think that they were kind of playing both sides off the middle, that they realized that they themselves were not quite a great power, but if there were two blocks that were roughly equal, their participation in one could make it the defining block.
Okay.
But I think now that they are really torn in their comprador elites, their native elites, about, do we want to be a plaything and pet of the West, or do we want to have an independent Indian foreign policy that does reiterate the stance of their major activity within the non-aligned movement in the 50s and 60s. But now they've got, because Modi is such a rabid Hindu nationalist, we need to look very quickly at Hindutva. Hindutva is a very malleable modernist concept of Hindu nationalism that under Modi's rule is really quite reactionary and nationalistic. And it lives on exacerbating the Hindu-Muslim tensions. And I think the Indian political class looks at Israel's violence against their Muslim population as a laboratory of control.
Yeah.
And what they might learn from such a hyper-violent, hyper-racist, religious ethno-state. There is also in the Sikh population a movement to create a homeland, an autonomous homeland in Punjab, roughly, called Khalistan. And the largest Sikh community outside of India is in Canada. And in June 18th, a activist in favor of Khalistan, Sinj Nijar, was killed outside of a Gurdwara in Surrey, just south of Vancouver, British Columbia. Gurdwara is one of their Sikh temples. And September 18th, Trudeau accused India of his assassination. Diplomatic crisis between India and China, India and Canada. Is India starting to take a page from the Mossad playbook of extrajudicial, extraterritorial assassination? So India's not sure if it really wants to entirely condemn Israel because they think they might have something to learn. And I believe they are the 7th largest trading partner with Israel. Now we can look at Turkey. Turkey had 100 ship transit through the Bosphorus Straits on October 19, Turkish Republic Day, while the NATO Dynamic Mariner war games were held very nearby. Turkey saying, yes, we are a member of NATO, but we are an independent force as well. And before the October 29th naval exercise, Erdogan gave a speech. It had to be before 1 million people on October 25, saying Israel is criminal, war criminal, Hamas are freedom fighters. So I think Erdogan is simultaneously gunning to be the leader of the Sunni world, but also the Turkish world that spreads from Istanbul all the way to what is called either Eastern Turkmenistan or Xinjiang, the new territories of China. And the corridor in the Caucasus that makes that possible we'll get to. So, and then Turkey also provides a lot of gas to Israel through the Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan. The C in BTC is Ceyhan in Turkey. So he's saying he's going to be a freedom fighter against Israel, and yet he's giving gas to Israel.
Yeah.
Okay, now Iran. March 10 this year, China brokers a peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia in Beijing. Behind the scenes, this started with Russia, worked its way through Iraq, but Russia was willing to give China the W.
Mm-hmm.
They let them take the credit for this normalization. So that's important. And Iran is well, first of all, the leader of Iran and MBS met for the first time since 1979, their heads of state. MBS is not formal head of state, but he's running the show. Iran is a member of BRICS Plus and the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement. Russia and China don't need a NATO level formal commitment from Iran to realize that they're in a partnership for Eurasian integration.
Yeah.
And this Chinese number 2 that just died, heart failure? I don't know. Li Qiang.
Right.
About Iran, he said, China will continue to firmly support Iran in safeguarding its national sovereignty, territorial integrity, and national dignity, and will oppose any external forces interfering in Iran's internal affairs. We'll run through some bullet points. Russia has linked its bank messaging system with Iran.
Yeah.
They're working on a CBDC to profit off the north-south transit corridor. 20% of the world's energy goes through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
China has tripled their imports from Iran because they're selling at a bit of a discount over the last 2 years. Purchased 87% of its output. So China's invested.
Yeah.
In more ways than one.
Heavy. Mm-hmm.
What do American elites think of it? Well, because Iran, this is unfinished business for America.
Yeah, has been for quite some time.
Oh my God, Mark. It goes back to the storming of the embassy and the hostage crisis, 79 and 80.
Yeah.
Carter tried to send some helicopter squadron. It failed and they crashed in the desert. Covert operations, including Israel, got the hostages released the day of Reagan's inauguration. They're still pissed about overthrowing Mossadegh, and Iran didn't have the common decency to stay bought off with the Shah of Iran. How dare they have an Islamic revolution? But then it goes on to clean break, 1996. Bush's speech after 9/11, when he said that Iran, Iraq, and North Korea are the axis of evil. And now before us, we have a slide from a 2009 paper from the Brookings Institution, which says, which path to Persia? And I looked at the authors, and they were all bipartisan, national security state, Yale, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Georgetown, just the usual suspects of functionaries. And they issued this paper, and one of the chapters was leave it to Bibi. Like, let's let Israel attack Iran.
Yeah.
But Israel can't. And even Netanyahu says, no, you guys really should. But let's bring it up to date. Even Mitch McConnell and Mike Johnson are saying that now the axis of evil is North Korea, Russia, China, and Iran.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really unfinished business for America. The same way Israel is using wholesale slaughter in Gaza to reestablish its myth of deterrence, so too might the United States finally attack Iran.
Yeah.
To reestablish the myth of the unchallengeability of NATO, which was definitively shattered in Ukraine. I don't think they will. I think we're in step 2 of a 3-step process, and we're going to get to East Asia when this really becomes the Suez Canal Crisis moment for multipolarity. But generally, the point being, America has had Iran in its sights for many years, and political elite still want to fuck with it.
Yeah.
But even this article from the Brookings Institute, which, okay, that one supposedly leans more democratic, but it's bipartisan. It doesn't matter, especially on foreign policy. This very think piece said, quote, Iran has never been and almost certainly never will be an existential threat to the United States. It harbors no territorial designs on the United States, has never conducted a terrorist operation aimed at the American homeland, and even should it acquire nuclear weapons, lacks the delivery systems to threaten the United States directly. So even though they're pining to go to war with it, they know it's not a threat.
Yeah.
So now we can get to the Caucasus and start trying to bring this thing on home. Well, the Caucasus has what they call the Zangezur corridor, and you see it right there on the slide. It allows Turkey to create a contiguous link to Azerbaijan if Azerbaijan would take over that little piece of very deep south Armenia.
Yeah.
Armenia is trying to play both sides off the middle. Russia didn't help when it lost Nagorno-Karabakh, so it tilts a little to America. They had war games with NATO recently. And Turkey, Erdogan, sees that if we can just take that corridor, then that's a contiguous link from Istanbul to Xinjiang, to Eastern Turkmenistan. And of Central Asia, only Tajikistan is Iranian and Farsi in language and culture. The rest is all Turk. So that's the last piece linking Turkey to not only Azerbaijan and all of their oil and gas wealth, but to the rest of not only being a Sunni power, but a Turkic power. And Armenia or Azerbaijan got a lot of its weapons from Israel, and that's how they kicked Armenia's ass so quickly. But Iran, look at that ethnographic map of Iran. All that dark green in the northwest of Iran is Azer people. But they want to keep themselves a state, so they have deep ties with Azerbaijan. But it's a complicated game in the Caucasus. So now we can get to Egypt. Al-Sisi told Blinken to go pound sand a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And he goes off for like 2 or 3 minutes. And he says, well, Jews have lived in the Arab world and Muslim world without any difficulty for millennia. This anti-Semitic problem is in Europe. And he said, it's in Germany and it's in Spain. And and Blinken was there, and I can just see Blinken, like his mental Rolodex going, like the thought cloud in Homer Simpson, where it's a monkey clapping some gong on a little motorcycle that's going around in circles. I see Blinken's mind going, Spain. The monkey's going, Spain? You mean Franco? Yeah, Franco's were allied with Hitler, but were they anti-Jew? It wasn't Franco's Spain. It was the Reconquista in 1492 when Castile and Aragon finally united the Iberian Peninsula and threw out the Arabs and the Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow I don't think Blinken knows that level of historical context.
Yeah.
All right. So as we dash through the regional partners, Saudi Arabia created a military agreement with Russia October 21st, 2021, because America's exit from Afghanistan showed that, wow, so we spent $5 trillion to get rid of the Taliban, to then give Afghanistan back to the Taliban. So Saudi Arabia is looking for its own self-interest. They are a prospective member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And here's what everyone that has anguish over the slaughter of Gaza thinks. Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq, and Kuwait could by themselves cut off almost half of the oil production in one fell swoop. And that would create inflation and domestic unrest in the core states of neoliberalism. And bond yields have just reached 5% for the first time since 2007, right before the 2008 financial crisis. And Moody is lowering its output of U.S. credit from stable to negative, and inevitably raise the cost of borrowing. So OPEC holds 80% of the world's proven oil revenues. OPEC Plus controls 9.7, and that could be enough to create a serious oil embargo. But I don't think they're going to do it. So let's dash briefly through Syria and Lebanon as two of the people that might be brought into this crisis in West Asia. So Syria, they may or may not reclaim the Golan Heights. And certainly Russia, which has a naval facility in Tartus and an air base in Khmeimim, is not going to allow Syria to go the way of Libya or any of the so-called friends of America that then get slaughtered by it. But Israel has bombed Damascus and Aleppo airports, but they don't dare bomb the Russian naval and air base. But what have they been doing to Syria and Iraq, these proxies of Iran, so-called? The slide I show before us has a number of recent attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq. Iraq has told them to leave. Syria did not invite them and told them to leave, but they still remain there. Where does the United States remain? Where Syria has its oil and natural gas. our gas and oil and wheat, the wheat production. So also Syria is suffering from white phosphorus attacks, or not Syria, South Lebanon is suffering from Israeli white phosphorus attacks in October of this year. But the Associated Press, AP, called them flares. So that is a analysis of not only Gaza and the humanitarian crisis and the criminal aggression of Israel, whose only partner is the United States, but trying to link Gaza to the last few months of multilateral and bilateral relations that show that this is probably Act 2 out of 3 for a larger attempt by the West against the rest, the new global majority, to help Israel reestablish its myth of invulnerability, its myth of deterrence, with the United States and NATO's myth of unchallengeability, as all the West and the rest, and Israel as their aircraft carrier in West Asia, to circle the drains. And now I thank our 5 listeners on YouTube, Locals, BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble. And we may yet do a part 2 of the stirring conclusion to what I will be posting soon on stonefruit.substack.com. The Suez Canal Crisis moment for multipolarity, or World War III. Stay tuned at the platforms I described for the conclusion of this event. From 10 miles away from Pearl Harbor and the dark heart of the Indo-Pacific Command, I bid you adieu.